Hello, my name is Paul Bisanti. I'm Vice President of the Brantford-Brant Chamber of Commerce and your host for this series. Today, in this series of fireside chats with federal election candidates, we're meeting with Adrienne Roberts of the New Democratic Party of Canada. And this is the first in the series of 2021-2022 Chamber TV episodes, a series that hopes to look into the business issues in the Brantford-Brant community and expand on those a little bit. So first and foremost, thank you very much, Adrienne. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
this is a wonderful opportunity to just sit and chat.
Yeah, it's great to get to know you on a more personal level, and that's our hope for the viewers as well, that they can get to know who you are. Adrienne, farming was a big part of your upbringing.
Yes.
With our community here, Brantford-Brant is not just a city or a collection of cities. There's actually a really large rural component. What have been some of the most important life lessons that you've gained from your upbringing in the farming community?
I just want to clarify, I didn't have like a big farm. I guess it would be classified as a hobby farm.
Sure.
So my parents, they actually came from the north of England, hardcore city, a lot of poverty, and they wanted land, and they learned it all themselves. There was no one to mentor them. So I had goats and chickens. So every summer I raised chickens, and we would keep half and then sell half to friends and neighbors. So it was a little business I had. It was a lot of entrepreneurship when I think about it too, which I didn't think about it in those terms until recently. But it was, here I am, 8 years old, 10 years old, doing the chickens, and we'd be able to feed ourselves and having those lessons, and yet still bringing in a little bit of income, which, when you're 10, woohoo.
Yeah.
And then I was a fair kid, so my forte was flowers. So a lot of flowers. I love flowers. I still do. I touch them, and I just love being around flowers. I was Queen of the Roses for 1 year with all the fair entries I had. I had the most points in the school exhibit for flowers. But it was, I always say it was an idyllic childhood. Oh. And I am so grateful to my family for, persevering, because times were rough for them. There were times where our well run out and we didn't have water. It took years later and before they had city water. It was hard work, as anyone in rural communities know. You go from, right in the early morning right till night. But it was just that self-sufficiency and learning new skills. My parents had never milked goats or anything like that, but having that role modeling of, okay, we're gonna try it, and they just did it. And my parents are phenomenal people. I don't generally talk about them a lot. You'll notice that in the campaign. I keep my family quite private just out of respect, because that's their lives. And but I do have this strong family support in many different areas. But yeah, rural life and having that background. My parents are still in the same house, and having worked in the fields for 8 years, grafting roses and going where you just come home and you crash because you're so exhausted. Having the farmer's tan, I was that kid. It just provides this opportunity to understand a different kind of work ethic where you see the product of your labor very tangibly. When you have a big pile of dirt and you've got to shovel it, and move it over here, there's a sense of satisfaction to that tangible productivity that I think that you don't always get when you're doing other things in life, and having that made a huge difference. So I like those tangible.
As a guy who has shoveled his share of piles of dirt, I totally appreciate that.
And it's not just dirt in there, we know that too.
Half of it's rock. So the community that this riding represents is incredibly diverse. There's over 160,000 people that live here. Lots of people in urban centers like Brantford, Paris, things like that. But the rural community, as well as the Six Nations and the Mississaugas of the First Credit Nation. So in this riding in particular, with all these diverse views, the candidate would have to represent a whole lot of people, even those that didn't vote for them. So with that in mind, what motivated you to run? Why now? Why the NDP? Why Why now?
So initially it was youth who inspired me. So youth live everywhere. And as a teacher, I guess around 2018, I was sitting in a grade 12 class, had a great relationship with them. And they're very authentic and honest. And what came out, they just talked about, they used the word hopelessness. They just felt like, what's the point? And that motivated me because youth shouldn't feel hopeless. You know, I didn't feel like that at 17 and 18. I felt like the world was my oyster. And that's a theme I'm hearing with a lot of the youth. We have a lot of youth on our campaign. So for me, and this is in my riding, and these are my students, and these are the youth of the next, you know, they're the next generation. I feel like I had to step up and really try and represent their voice, because often they're not heard. They're often ignored or even seen as, well, you'll know, you're not old enough to know. And they do. They're passionate individuals and they have concerns, they have worries. And I want to represent them, be they in rural, be they in urban, be they new to Brantford. You know, so it's something that we see throughout the community. And then again, like we just talked about, I have that rural history. I do have a passion for that agricultural portfolio, but I also live in our core. And so when I moved to Brantford, my husband and I, we lived in East Ward, and then we purchased a home 5 years ago in Eagle Place. So we're urban. My husband's a city kid. He came from Cambridge, and he's only ever known that. So I've worked with students all over the board. So I also have Indigenous students who I get to know and work with and hear their concerns. And yes, I have students who live on territory who don't have running water. And we talk about those things. You know, they talk about how even just trying to wash their clothing and trying to come to school. So I have these connections through youth in particular that have given me a lens into different areas of our community. Because you're right, we are a very diverse community with a lot of different interests and a lot of different needs. But through them, it's a window. And I'm grateful they've shared that, to have them be willing to open up and express what their concerns are. So that's what really prompted me. And this is my community. I love our community. You know, I love living here. Even before I lived here, my best friend was here, so I spent a lot of time here. I want more for our community. I want more for them. And that's why I'm doing it.
Do you think that the same maybe top 2 or 3 issues that individuals are facing coming out of this pandemic are similar in nature to what the business community is going through, or do you see them as a different set of issues between individuals and the business community?
I think some of the issues are definitely connected. So for instance, the opioid crisis, that is impacting our business community downtown. They're connected, and homelessness is having an impact on our downtown. So there's connections there, but it also, even just, the opioid crisis is not just, I'm just using that as one example, but it's not just connected to downtown, it's happening in our rural areas too. And so it's impacting everywhere. But, you know, I have worked with some of the businesses downtown, and they're trying to make change to help our street families and work towards solutions, because they know what we have right now isn't working. And they're willing to do that. There's a lot of compassion down there. You know, I see the businesses share food. I see businesses know the street family community. You know, they want the same change. So I think there's a connection there. And when you do that, that also then allows the downtown, for instance, to flourish, because there's a perception by some people that it's not safe. I don't think that perception's true. I've always felt safe down there, and that's nighttime or day, but it changes that dynamic. And so I don't think you can remove housing crisis, opioid crisis, and just a general pandemic from as separate issues. It does impact our businesses.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I think there is this sort of desire for us to sort of compartmentalize things into individual categories, but you can't remove the opioid crisis from the housing crisis.
Right.
Specifically on the opioid crisis, how would an NDP-led government tackle something like that in our community, but also nationwide? Like, what specific things would the Singh government do to address this?
So first off, it's a public health emergency, and it needs to be considered that. And I'm very, very fortunate that a lot of the advocacy groups have invited me into their space, and I've done some work with them, like Bisanti, People Helping People, and a bunch of other individuals who are just out there on the streets. And I do go down with them. I am invited to participate. So I have that local lens. Yeah. I do know students. We have lost students to the opioid crisis. Over 20,000 people have died with the opioid crisis. It's a public health emergency, so we've got to start from there. As an NDP government, we're looking at decriminalizing for small possession, very similar to the Portugal model.
Sure.
And by doing that, what you're doing is removing that barrier because, again, everything's connected. You can't take that away from trauma. Most substance use comes from trauma that hasn't been treated, mental health and mental illness, and a lack of hope with housing, and you give up. So when you start, you've got to combat all that. It's not a one solution tackle, but if you add on to someone who's going through all this, then you add on a criminal charge and a charge that's on their record. That's one more barrier. Yeah. So that even 7 years down the line, that's something that's still a barrier for them. And 7 years from now, they may have had the opportunity to go through harm reduction and treatments, but that's still going to be lingering there. You don't want to criminalize people for having that impact from possibly even childhood. So that's where to start. And then from there, you need the wraparound supports. You need the housing. You need the counseling. Not all mental health services are covered. There's wait lists. And when you're ready now. You can't just say to someone, okay, we're going to get you on a wait list. And streamlined. So having one center of support, because when you're going through crisis, you don't want to be from here to here to here to a hamster wheel of bureaucracy. Sure. So you need all those supports. Harm reduction. You need to be able to gradually through. And we've got to do things to stop people from dying, and take away the discrimination of substance use. I'm not going to use the word stigma, it's discrimination. And, that means allowing people to have access to working with the provinces and the municipalities to ensure safe supply, because people are dying because it's unsafe supply. When you add in those harm reduction strategies, people are less likely to die. And that's what we're talking about here. These are people dying. They are brothers, sisters, friends, children, neighbors. It's death. Over 20,000 people that we know of directly impacted. Then there's all the other things that cost to families, the suicides that come out of the opioid crisis, the relationship breakdowns. All these things are connected. And I always talk about connection because I don't believe that you can always do 1 point issues.
Right.
Everything impacts. We impact each other having this conversation.
Sure.
So, as an NTP government, that's what we need to do. And as someone here locally, because I'm so active in that community and have learned from those who are doing phenomenal work and have actually, been on the streets with people listening, we can do this locally. I did reach out and spoke with the health center downtown on Colburn Street, the Indigenous Health Center. They have a plan that will include counseling, nutrition. They just need the funds for the building and to help get that set up.
Right.
And we have to make that a priority because there is a racial impact and connection with opioid use. If you are Indigenous, you are 5 times more likely to die of an opioid overdose. You're 5 times more likely to die of overdose. And it's also then connecting to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited people. Like, this is where we have to address this.
Right.
So again, it's wraparound. It's
So,
full. It's
again,
holistic, right?
The full, it's not,
Yeah.
again, not a 1 point issue, but
Yeah.
everything is connected to each other.
Yeah.
And like you said, housing, a lack of affordable and
Yeah.
accessible housing creates this hopelessness.
Yeah.
So again, in an NDP-led government, how do you tackle the housing crisis that is very acutely felt here, but also nationally?
It is, and we all know. I think every candidate is hearing about the housing crisis. It's going such an impact, and what we're seeing is more and more youth staying at home with their families or moving back. My own sister-in-law was suddenly evicted, and she had 2 months. It was a reno eviction. Had to find somewhere new. Found somewhere, but had she not, she would have moved in with us. It's so instant to be to lose your housing. And I don't think sometimes people realize how quick it can be that, within 2 months she could have been homeless, theoretically, right? And we're hearing that, and there's others I know who are going through the same thing. So as an NDP government, there's a variety of strategies. One, we need to reach out, and the municipalities have been doing it on their own. They're overwhelmed. They can't do it, not on their own. And so we've got to reach out and work collaboratively. Okay, what do you need for startups let's get some startups on cooperative housing, intergenerational housing, retrofits, reusing, some of our older buildings. How can we take older hotels that maybe we can add some love to them and make them into housing models?
Sure.
We've seen a tiny house movement in Toronto. Let's be innovative in how we look at housing. In addition, when we talk about affordable housing, let's be very clear. Affordable housing is 30% of your gross income. Right now, people are paying 70, 80% of their income. So we have a plan for 500,000 units of affordable housing to work with, again, the provinces and territories, and as a national housing strategy, let's get some more affordable housing. And then,
How do you do that?
so that's where you put the money in, and we work with the Canadian Housing.
CMHC.
Thank you.
Mortgage and
Yes.
Housing Corporation. Yeah.
And that's what they used to do. It used to be a more reciprocal relationship. Now it's become very much about you get your mortgage insurance from them,
Right.
but they actually used to be working with the federal government in a housing game. So we used to have big national housing back in the 70s, and then it was pulled out and downloaded on the provinces and the municipalities, and it's too much.
Right.
So we need to get back in the game in a big way, not just little bits and drabs, right? And so we've got to work to get the houses built. And not $1 million homes that people can afford.
Sure.
So and again, that then it creates more job economy. When you're getting into that, you're getting opportunities for apprenticeships, new growth in green economies because you can make them energy efficient. So you're impacting for jobs as well.
Right. On the jobs front, I think if you drive around town or if you pick up the newspaper, you'll see help wanted or classified ads almost everywhere. What can the federal government do to get people into those living wage situations where they're earning those incomes, where you're getting our employers well-needed bases of employment to do these jobs that exist out there?
Well, in some of the jobs, we know that there just isn't enough people trained in doing them. So, for instance, with the caring economy, these are our PSWs, our nurses. We need more of these individuals who are so vital to our economy, right? And they're so vital to our well-being. So we have a plan as an NDP government to really support a caring economy. And that means providing funds for training and even working with veterans. Veterans have the opportunity for retraining and putting money into retraining opportunities into different fields of where we need. I just spoke today actually with the Agricultural Society, a member from there, and we talked about the need for more agricultural workers and different skills that are related to that.
Right.
That's more than just growing. It's about engineering. It's about fixing, you have to have someone to fix the heavy industry. materials. So we need to start investing in these areas and actually put funding. I know, for instance, like PSWs, let's get their funding, and that's through that EI program as well. Let's put the money into where we need people and increasing then those skills that we can use. And then that goes in hand with our caring economy. You know, we're going to invest in nurses. We, as an NDP government, are going to create a national fund that will hire 2,000 more nurses into our communities. And specifically our rural and northern need a lot more help there. Working with our youth to provide incentives to go into, through tax credits for northern and rural communities, which we know that there's a lot of need there and a lot of missing healthcare workers.
Would you see immigration as a route to address some of those workforce deficiencies?
For sure.
Yeah.
And how many of us, we've met newcomers who have been trained in engineering and healthcare and skilled trades like electricians, and they're not able to do the job they're training because they have to take so many different steps in order to do that. A friend of ours, she was a lawyer in Colombia, and she is working as a legal aid now. You know, so how many people have we met that have this training that we're not utilizing their skills, which also then boosts them up and gives them more opportunities, right? So we need to start looking at working with newcomers and streamlining the process in order to earn the qualifications and make it less cumbersome and more welcoming, because it doesn't matter that you happen to be born in India or born in Bulgaria. If you have those skills, we should be utilizing them. We want that.
Yeah. What sort of immigration policies would the NDP platform present to try and attract and get those skilled immigrants into our workforce in a much needed capacity?
Well, and there's one of the problem is the wait time and reuniting families. So I know it takes many, many years to bring families together. And when you bring families together, that again creates more opportunities for different people working in different skill levels. For instance, we have a very close family friend, and she worked here for 8 years on a visa with her family living in the Philippines, and then applied to bring her family over. And it took over almost 3-4 years for them to actually arrive in Canada. And in that time, they had to keep doing their medical and re-up doing it, and it cost them a lot of money to do that. Now that they're here, one is working as in long-term care as a PSW, others are working in retail, and another is working in skilled trades. So, if we speed up that process, families should be reunited.
Yeah.
And that is another way that we can build our skilled trade and just provide a better quality of life as well for other people.
Very interesting. A big section of the economy that can bring those skilled trades, incentivize those skilled trades, could be infrastructure spending. Brantford and Brant have a large number of public infrastructure jobs coming up: roads, bridges, buildings, rail networks, things like that. What would your party's plan be to contribute to or fund public infrastructure projects? Well,
one of the key messages we want people to be aware of is that we are focused on Canadian products and Canadian material made goods. So when we're talking about the steel and things like that, an emphasis on Canadian, because that employs Canadian workers.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we're always focused on our workers. And then from that also, when you're investing in infrastructure, which we know we need to do, it's skilled trades and apprenticeships. And that's an area that I think has been lacking, working and teaching. There's this belief that kids don't want to go into skilled trades, and that's actually not true. The hard part is making the transition. I worked at Tollgate. We have lots of students at our magnet program who really want to get into skilled trades, and they come from all over the city because they want the experience. I think we're only one of 2 that have a masonry program. We're in desperate need of people who can do masonry. So when you're investing in infrastructure, you also have the opportunity to really build up apprenticeship. So it has to go hand in hand. And and we work with our unions to do that. Our unions are the place for a lot of our apprenticeship opportunities. So by supporting our unions, we're also supporting skilled trades. We're supporting the growth of our infrastructure. Again, I keep saying it, but you can't just look at things as a one. You have to look at the whole sort of spokes and where they all lead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big challenge today. Is everyone wants to absorb information in sound bites and Twitter tweets, and nothing is necessarily that simple. Everything affects each other.
Yeah.
Like look at climate change as an example. How dynamic a situation is that?
Exactly.
I think we're at a point in time where most people will recognize that climate change is real.
Yeah.
How would you address the concern that we have to address climate change, but we have to do it in such a way as to not make our businesses uncompetitive?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think most people do care. They absolutely do care about climate change. We're hearing it on the door. It's a priority issue. So again, investing in green energy. So right now we're putting billions of dollars into fossil fuels and other things that are taking from us rather than giving back. So let's reinvest that into green energy. Here in Brantford-Brant, we have a new business, a new manufacturing that they are taking PPE, breaking it down, sterilizing it, recycling it to make more PPE. That's a circular economy, and they're paying living wage jobs. This is right here locally. That's a great example of how we get into a just transition and how we support recycling while at the same time providing a living wage, and people want food on the table. Yeah. That's what they want. So that if we can bring more jobs like that and businesses and manufacturing like that into our local economy, that has an impact.
Yeah, that's great. Adrienne, it's been wonderful sitting down with you today. I'm sure we could have filled multiple segments. I appreciate you coming in here. I appreciate you giving the viewers and the local business community an insight into who you are and what your party stands for. Our hope as the Chamber of Commerce and our partners at Rogers TV are to give our viewers an opportunity to get to know the individual candidates and the platforms and to know the people behind the politics, because at heart, like you said, we're all people here. And just want to extend our heartfelt thanks for coming in today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, and thanks to the viewers. I appreciate that, and it's always great. This is where change happens, dialogue.